Welcome, everybody. I'm Dustin Hurst, the Communication Director for the Idaho Freedom Foundation. I am joined by the hardest working man in the freedom movement, Connor Boyack, and there's a reason I say that. He's an author, activist, father, publishes, I think, like 40 books a year, something like that. No, just, Connor, if you will, you're pretty well known, but for those who aren't acquainted, can you tell us your background and how you got into the liberty movement and into education policy specifically?
Yeah, okay. So I started Libertas Institute in 2011, just because in our state there was a bit of void for, free market ideas and someone to really espouse and advance them. And so we've been at the helm for about 8 years. And, in Utah, for example, the legislature about a decade ago passed a vouchers program, and then the teachers unions came in and dumped, millions of dollars and got the voters to overturn it. And so we don't really have much of any education choice here. And so I recognized early on that we needed to do some work. But what happened a few years into doing Libertas Institute was that, I'm a dad. I've got two kids at home. And at the time, they were like 5 and 3 when this happened. I would find myself coming home and wanting to tell them like what I did all day, But then like, how do you talk about civil rights and property rights and justice and, free markets and stuff to a 5-year-old? And so, like any parent, I went on Amazon, like, is there a book that will help me do this, right? That will do this for kids, and couldn't find anything. And so that prompted this idea to start doing children's books and talk to the rising generation about important ideas that matter, that they're not being exposed to in school, that probably most of their parents don't really know how to articulate, so they don't bother. And we've just been having a bang up job. It's these Tuttle Twins books, or bang up time rather. We've had an enjoyable time doing this project and finding ourselves always brainstorming how we can teach young people about these time tested principles that really make America great. And how can we do that more? How can we do that better? And just recognizing that like education policy covers a wide range of things. Like we can try and work within the system, and improve the system, which is important, and we ought to be doing that. But there's so many other opportunities to try and help people see that there are alternative paths outside the system, right? And so maybe that means homeschooling slash unschooling slash road schooling slash, whatever alternative you might want to pursue. Or maybe it means, look, for whatever reason, you're going to be in the public school system, but let's at least make sure that we are doing our best to be educating those children and supplementing them with the principles and ideas that the public school system isn't going to do. And that's kind of where we find ourselves in that sweet spot.
Now, before, to do a little prep for this interview, I was reading some of the blogs you'd written on your personal blog and on the Libertas site. And you talked about how you are educating your kids. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of an unschooling type concept. Is that correct? And talk about how you personally educate your kids and allow them to pursue their interests.
So, the interesting thing about educating children in a marriage with a husband and a wife is it takes two to tango. So I'm definitely more the unschool variety. I wrote a book called Passion Driven Education, which is all about using a child's interests to kind of build a curriculum around that. I think of myself in school. It's like, why do we have to learn this, right? And the teacher's like, oh, because you have to. And when am I ever going to use this? Oh, you will someday.
Yeah, it's on the test is what it is.
Exactly. And so I personally, I graded against that. I really did not like learning things because I was supposed to when I didn't have the vision of why it mattered. And so the thing I like about passion-driven education is that you're speaking to a child in a language they already understand. You're not going to a kid and speaking to them in the language of biology or algebra, these foreign languages that they're having to like make sense of. And you're speaking in a different tongue. What are you saying, teacher, right? No, like if your kid likes Pokemon, then teach them math in the language of Pokemon, right? And use Pokemon characters to as substitution for variables in algebra, right? Or talk about the biology of Pokemon and like, oh, well, what would this be like? And like because then a child like that's a language they not only understand but love, and so you're helping them like catch the vision for learning everything that they can about the thing that they're interested in. And so you're able to introduce all sorts of subject matter. So that's kind of the approach that I am far more interested in. My wife is very much on the same page conceptually, but comes from an approach where she wants the kids to have the basics. And so she does use a bit of curriculum, primarily called The Good and the Beautiful, which is a really popular and good curriculum. But we are very hands off with it. So in our family, we don't test. We don't homeschool in the sense that we take school and just do it in the home, which is one of my criticisms of a lot of homeschools. They're just replicating all the bad ideas of school within the confines of their own home. So we are very laid back with it. If the kids push back, if they fight or resist, we're not going to compel them to do it. It's just like, hey, this is important. We want to expose you to these ideas. Let's talk about it together, work on it together, and just make sure that we're always having those hooks of like, here's why it matters to you, or here's how it pertains to your interest, just to make sure that it's relevant to them and that it's not drudgery. And that way, kind of little by little, we're helping them build their, knowledge and skills and so forth.
Well, I think it's valuable that you're doing both approaches, the more rigid curriculum based approach and the unschooling, so they understand both approaches actually. And I think that's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I just laugh because my son is a Pokemon. I mean, I don't know if your kids are obsessed with Pokemon like mine, but like we were at the park the other day and just he saw a friend and the friend was at like a music festival. And all of a sudden the Pokemon cards are out just like randomly. It's like they're always playing Pokemon. Anyway, was there any resistance or worry on the part of you or your wife about trusting your kids to choose the topics? Because I think a lot of people are like, well, they're just, I mean, quite frankly, it's like, hey, they're dumb kids. They have no idea what they're doing, and we can't trust them to direct their own education. Have you faced that? And how would you suggest people get over that line of thinking?
So for my driving thought in this, Dustin, is that I reject the notion that children are a blank slate onto which we need to imprint society's template. Right?
Right.
That's the idea behind curriculum and standards, is like, oh, kids need to be taught all these things, and here's what every kid needs to know, and we need to project onto them our vision of what is best and proper for them. I do not subscribe to that at all. I believe that is fallacious. I believe it is destructive. I come in part based on my religious views, but also just fundamentally as a parent. I believe my children come pre-printed in a way. I believe that they have unique interests and abilities and paths in life that I don't want to subvert. I don't want to derail them from what they would otherwise be best suited to do. I want to help them discover who they already are or who they are going to become. I don't want them to become mini me, right? I don't want them to become just like dad or just like the textbook says you ought to. And so that's the approach that my wife and I try and take in our education. And it's empowering, because rather than thinking, oh my gosh, I as a parent need to know how to teach them biology and how to teach them calculus, and like I need to be a subject matter expert in everything, right? Or rather than thinking, oh man, my kid's falling behind because here's this standard that society says he should be at when he's in the third grade or in the sixth grade, and he's got to pass that test. No, like we reject everyone else's expectations of what our children ought to become. They are their own unique individuals with their own unique interests, skills, characteristics, circumstances. And so we treat them as a one-off, and we look at them on their own, face value. Where are you at now? Where ought you to be? Where do you want to go? And it's a joint traveling experience where they are also at the helm, right, of their own ship of life. We're not just helping them navigate and they're a passenger on their own, ship. They're kind of a co-participant with us and saying, well, what do you want to learn? And what are you interested about? And so it really comes from just rejecting upfront and saying, look, yes, sure, every kid needs to learn to read and write. Every kid needs some basic math. You need basic abilities. But you look around, especially when you read folks like Peter Gray, right, who wrote Free to Learn, a phenomenal book I recommend to every parent, doing studies on like unschooling kids at Sudbury, right? Like let's look throughout history and find these experiences where these children who have the freedom to pursue their own interests and whatever they want to learn about end up learning how to read and write and learn math, right? Because they end up developing an end in mind. Like for me, early on, it was I want to do web development, and I also want to freelance. I want to write business proposals, and I want to, do that. And so I had to learn really well how to do math and how to do programming and how to write. And those things then became a means to the end, but I had developed an end. Children in school are not exposed to or encouraged to develop an end. It's just here's the means, here's the means, here's the means. Do it, do it, do it, do it.
Right.
And so the more quickly that I as a parent can help my children discover what their ends are, which can change over time, obviously, as they mature, then the things they're learning are going to come naturally. They're going to know that they need to learn those things. It's not going to be drudgery. It's going to be like, yeah, I want to learn how to do this well so that it will help me achieve my end goal and what I want to pursue. So no, I don't have any fear about my children falling behind or not learning different subjects because they are unique. And you know what? Not every kid needs to be proficient in calculus. I'm sorry, you just don't. Like how many adults are, right? We don't all need it. So I just have confidence in them becoming the person they're, destined to become, and that I'm going to help them navigate that along the way. And whatever they need to learn to fulfill that purpose and achieve that end, I'm going to be there to help them do that.
Well, and to add to that, I think self-directed education teaches them that they can do education without the teacher. I think sometimes in public schools we get this thought that there has to be somebody at the top guiding you, telling you what exactly you need to learn, instead of, you finding out. And maybe it's wasteful for you to look at something that you may not need to learn, but at least you're directing your pursuits and really understanding that you are the captain of your ship, and that you don't need somebody at the front of the classroom, spewing out facts at you. But the question I have, and one that I'm sure you get all the time about education, is you're not normal. You're not a normal parent. And you're very interested in this stuff, and you're very deliberate about it. Is this something that, single moms can do, that single dads can do, that the working families can do? Because a lot of people, I think, love the ease of the public school system, where it's, hey, drop my kid off in the morning, they get breakfast, they sit there, I don't have to babysit them, they get lunch, then I go pick them up at 3:30. Like, unschooling and homeschooling, it takes a lot of effort. It's worth it. Is this for everybody?
Yeah, great. Such an important question, right? Is this something for the elite few, or is this something that can be experienced and adopted by the masses? So I think you, Dustin, just hit the nail on the head. I think most parents today perceive school as not just learning, but also babysitting.
Yes.
And so, frankly, those who want that for their children, want to be alienated from their children, want someone else indoctrinating them for the most formative years of their childhood. Like if that's their position and their default, it's very hard to overcome that, I think, and get a parent to shoulder the burden and take the initiative to kind of be down there with their child and figuring this out together. You can't propose to a parent like that, like, hey, you want to do a lot more work? I mean, they have to be willing to invest that in their children. And look, even those parents obviously love their children,
Yes.
but I think it comes from a prioritization, right? If it's, work, if it's, hanging out with friends, if it's whatever it is, like, yeah, you have to prioritize your children and recognize that there are trade-offs. You're trading off all day, everyday babysitter, but what are you getting in return? And it does require taking a long view, right? Because you're helping develop a child where you're not going to see those characteristics fully developed and then applied for maybe 2 decades or even more. So that's the challenge. I've seen single moms do it. I've seen working families do it, especially in our day where we have things like homeschooling co-ops, where it's families joining together to kind of share the load. I mean, it's such a phenomenal resource. My wife is very involved in our local co-op here, and it's great because the average homeschooling or even unschooling parent often has self-doubt, right? Because they think like, oh, well, I don't know how to help my kid with science because I don't know science, and I don't know how to help my kid with English because I'm horrible at it. But not only do I think that's a flawed mentality, because again, a parent should be more a facilitator of learning rather than a teacher of all things. But the nice thing with a co-op is then, you've got like a mom who was a biology major and a dad who's a computer programmer and a mom who was a, English lit major. And so you've got all these experiences and expertise that can provide complementary support to the children in that co-op to, hey, I'm going to teach a little class, and let's, help kids in our co-op learn this because that's something that I have some experience in. So sharing the load, I think, is a great way, especially for those who, are in a position where they can't do it all themselves. They can't be with their children all the time. And look, at the end of the day, the principles that we're talking about can be adopted and applied, I think, even in a public school setting. It
Really?
just, well, so what I mean is, sure, your kid is, at school all day, every day, and then they come home with bucket loads of homework to do. But a parent who is in a position where they have to utilize a public school system, but who wants to help their children have a more, unschool, freedom, self-directed mindset, I think that parent's going to have to stand up and say to the teachers, sorry, my kid's not going to do all that homework. He was with you already. And if you're not teaching him, in the class, then that's on you. But I'm going to have, bonding time with my child. You're not going to take his afternoon and his evening from him as well. So that parent's going to have to stand up a little bit, be protective of the time that they do have together with their child. So the public school system isn't just seeping into the home. And then with that time, the parent, I think, is going to have to supplement, right? And say, well, look, if my kid gets home at 4 and then we're doing like piano practice or sports or whatever, like if all I've got with my kid is, let's say, 2 hours of free time a day, we're going to take advantage of that to help my child learn what they want to learn and use that amount of time for self-directed learning. But the children are going to be far more burned out because they've been in school, and if they're doing their homework, then they're doing their homework. So I think it requires that parent. I've seen it in some instances where the parent is going to push back and be a jealous guardian of that time at home, and then utilize that, even if it's just a little bit of time a day, to have a little bit more of a self-directed learning, passion-driven learning type of experience. As you point out, Dustin, in my own family, I'm more unschooling. My wife is more curriculum-based. You're going to find a circumstance in the families we're talking about now where you've got a public schooling experience for most of the day, and then you've got the more self-directed learning for a little part of the day. That child is going to see perhaps some differences there, and the parent is going to see that, and perhaps over time they're going to be able to figure out how to shift, right? How to do more self-directed learning and less public school, but just giving them that exposure and introducing them to the benefits that can come from that experience, I think is going to help them be motivated to maybe figure out a different, situation or circumstance that's going to empower them to do it even more.
Right. And I love what you guys are doing down in Utah with the children's business markets, because you're actually teaching kids how to do it. And there was a Stossel piece that came out a couple weeks ago about this school over in Pennsylvania that they don't have any curriculum. They let kids pursue their interests, and they learn by doing. And it's great because all the things that the public school says that it wants to do, teach kids grit and all this stuff, these schools are actually doing because they're hands-on and they learn rejection. There was one story of it was a graphic design team, and they said, hey, we had this client, but we messed it up and they fired us. And so we got real world experience. And I think a lot of kids, you might agree with this, a lot of kids are coming out of school anxious and depressed and just worried because they're not actually learning how to cope with failure. The grading. Go ahead.
They have 18 participation trophies.
And they have a 3.9 GPA and all of this stuff.
Right.
And so I think there's a social benefit too, where it's not just you learn how to learn, but you're forming the whole self, right? If that makes sense. Is that kind of something you guys are looking for?
This is dead on. I think the best thing that we can do for children is give them as much real world exposure as early as possible. So sure, like our children's entrepreneur markets are doing that a little bit, right? Come have a little business, learn about marketing and setting prices and counting money and competition because other kids' booths are right next to you, and closing the deal. Sure, you're getting some cool real world experience there, but the biggest complaint I think I have with public schooling is that you're shutting kids in a box for like their entire childhood, and then they become adults and you're like, oh, hey, it's completely like nothing that happens in the public school system matches reality. I went, I toured one of our state prisons a few weeks ago with some of my colleagues. And the warden was giving us a full tour. It was like 2 hours. And we get out and we drive a little bit down the road to go to like just have lunch. And across the street is, I think it was an elementary school. And someone on the team made the comment like, from the outside, that looks a lot like the prison did. And then another one said, same for the inside, right? Because it's your time is very regimented. You can't do anything without permission. It's very top
Right.
down and authoritarian. You're going to get disciplined if you don't follow the rules.
Yes.
Nothing about public school matches the real world, even in how you learn, right? Right now, when I want to learn something, a bell doesn't go off half an hour later and say, stop learning that thing. You have to go learn something else now,
Yep.
right? Or I'm not learning something that someone else has arbitrarily said, here's what this means, and here's all you need to know about it, and have this minimum standard. No, I'm like deeply exploring and going off on tangents and spending 7 hours with a set of books learning about something or watching videos on YouTube. Like it's just so arbitrary and artificial. That's the better word. And so look, again, some people are in a circumstance where they can't get out of it, but the more we can do as parents, as policymakers, as caring citizens to provide children a real world opportunity at a young age, we're going to help them better transition and cope, right? So we're
Right.
not kicking them out as graduates and saying, good luck. In my book, Passion Driven Education, I share the experience of this valedictorian, high school valedictorian in New York. I believe it was in 2010 or 11. Her name was Erica Goldson. And so here she gets up in front of the graduating class. All the teachers and administrators are behind her. Here's like this grade A product of public school, right? She gets up in this speech. It's phenomenal. You can find it online, including the video. She basically says, I am terrified. I focused on becoming the best student, getting extra credit, doing everything I was asked, and I have no clue what I want to do with my life, and I'm terrified. Meanwhile, all of my classmates who goofed off, who were doodling in class, who were focusing on other things and developing actual interests, have things that they at least want to pursue and figure out as they're going into their adult years. And so to me, it was very illustrative of like, we've set up this artificial system, and sure, we can have people who excel at that and they're really good at taking tests and doing homework and doing what the teacher says, but we're not equipping them for adulthood. And if anything, we're setting them up for failure, for anxiety, for a lot of these problems because they don't know how to adult very well. So the more we can help kids adult before they have to adult, I think the better off they'll be.
Oh goodness! Now we're making up verbs. Cool. I mean, whatever. I'm all for freedom. You are too. And I am struck by. I just read Uneducated, not Uneducated, Unschooled. I get those two mixed up. Two very good books. Read them both. But Unschooled by Carrie McDonald.
Yes.
And she made a point. A lot of times, policy wonks focus on, hey, this is costing X number of dollars per student, and we're wasting that because our results aren't great. But she makes a really interesting point that a kid could spend up to around 15,000 hours in classrooms and come out with what? There's a very human cost to our failures in education. And if the school system can't produce well-educated, prepared kids after 15,000 hours, then there's a problem. And I think we need to have that discussion. I do want to shift gears for just a second. You have two new books coming out, the Tuttle Twins book, Education Vacation. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
Okay, and that one's based on John Taylor Gatto's work. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, and John Taylor Gatto is one of the thought, I hate the term thought leaders, but whatever, the great things about education reform. So check that one out. But I'm more interested right now in Skip College. Tell me about that book, how it came together, and why you're putting that one out.
Okay, so this one comes out here in a few weeks, and the whole goal is to expose teenagers and young adults to alternatives outside the conveyor belt of college. This is born of my own experience. I did not really consider or nor was I exposed to alternatives. It was just assumed that that's what you do, and here's where you apply, and go get them, and 4 more years of school, and then we'll see what happens on the end. I never contemplated an alternative. My parents never exposed me to it. So I find myself in college soon wondering, why am I here? Like, I wanted to be a web developer. I had already learned on the side how to do it. I had clients. I was sitting in my web development classes, freelancing, doing work for clients who were paying me money while I was paying to sit in a class to learn things that I already knew. So I quickly was like, what the heck is going on here? I got through it. I got my diploma because, gotta get to mine. But then in the years since, like, the college debt bubble has just drastically exploded. I've got younger brothers, going through college, and friends, and just really seeing that there wasn't a lot of compelling educational awareness about alternatives. You've got some great things like Praxis is a fantastic model. I know you've talked to Isaac Morehouse. You've got schools like Lambda School, which is kind of new, where you pay nothing until you get a job, and then they take a small portion of your earnings to pay them back. So it's kind of a guarantee, right? If there's no upfront expense. So there's these cool models coming out, but I just felt like there needed to be a book. There needed to be a sit-down educational resource, and lots of little articles floating around online. And I said, you know what? Like, I'm not the expert here. I've got some ideas, but I wanted to gather together, rather than me writing a book, I wanted to gather together a lot of great people, including several that you have interviewed here, to give their insights and their experiences. And so this book is a compilation of essays from different people, and each with some fantastic perspectives. And the whole goal is to provide our young readers kind of a well-rounded alternative, or really a set of alternative ideas, not just the theory. There's so much like practical advice of like, look, if you want to go down this route, here's what you ought to do. Start up a blog, and don't build a resume, but build a portfolio, and talk to these people, and apprentice here, and very strategic and practical tips to say, look, if you're going to do this, you want to do it right. And so here's some things that you should consider. We want that young adult to not be like, oh, hey, I've now got the idea to not go to college. We want them to have like a path that they can follow, a plan that they can execute. And so that's the idea. That's the goal of the book.
Okay. And that one comes out, you said, in a couple weeks? It was
mid-July. Yep.
Okay. That one's definitely one you should order. Like I said on Facebook, I rarely pre-order books because I want to see reviews first. But this is one, I mean, Carrie McDonald's written in it, John Taylor Gatto, Brittany Hunter, and just an all-star cast. So go pick up this book. It's gonna be a really good one. I want to close up today. Got just a couple minutes left. For families who are pondering, in fact, I've got a friend who hit me up yesterday. He said, hey, the public school system sucks. There's no one-on-one time. Our kids are struggling. We're thinking about pulling them out. What can you give us? And I said, here's this, this, and this. What can you give people who are really thinking deeply about leaving the public school system and pursuing homeschool, or those people who want to apply those principles even while their kids remain in public schools? What resources can you offer?
So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of books. What I would say is two things. One is find a support group. Okay. So if there's a local co-op, if it's just a Facebook group, if it's someone at your church and your neighborhood who's been down this path before you, it's a scary and daunting path. I've talked to so many parents who want to do it, but they're terrified, or they're going to do it, but they have no clue how. Get a mentor, right? Even as one person or a support group, find someone in your community, in your network, who can support you and give you ideas. That's having that human bond and that guide is going to be critical as you consider how to do this. So yeah, there's all sorts of books out there, but find a real person who you can talk to, share your concerns with, and get ideas from. The second thing I would say is I am a huge fan of deschooling. So if anyone is considering leaving public school to pursue some alternative path, you need the confidence to know that you can do this. You need to, frankly, reacquaint yourself with your children in a summertime, afternoon, weekends context. Like, what does it mean to actually do things together during the day when everyone else is at school? What does it mean to not have the expectation of homework? And so traditionally, the formula, if you will, is that for every year of public schooling, you want to do a month of deschooling. Basically, give your time to detox. Like, you've been on hard drugs for quite a while. You need a detox period before you're a new person. And,
Right.
and in all seriousness, I've seen people who just jump into one thing and they just kind of crash and burn. I've seen the people who kind of transition and ease themselves into the process. and it ends up being far better. And so I think having a support system is key. And I think being patient with yourself, giving yourself this transition opportunity to figure out how it works for you. Every homeschooling family looks different. Every unschooling experience is a bit different. You got to find that what works for you. Just be patient. It's a bit of a transition, but you come out on the other side with far more confidence and excitement about the future. And it's something I encourage every parent to consider.
And I think too, one thing I've learned as I've been studying this and kind of applying these principles in my home is sometimes you just need to chill out, man. There's a lot of pressure put on modern parents from the state, from the system itself, from marketers who want to scare you into thinking you can't do stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think you just need to realize that you're fine. You made it. You can guide your kids. You can help them, and they are more capable than I think you think. And I think you also have to realize that we have more resources than at any other time in history.
Yeah.
You can learn anything on YouTube. You can go to Coursera. You can go to Khan Academy. You can go to, there are myriad outlets for this type of learning that you want to do.
That's right.
So just chill out, be confident, and like you said, I think just support group is an idea. So 2 books coming out this month. Well, coming out in the next couple weeks. John Taylor Gatto's work is the basis for one, and then Skip College is the other. Any other plugs you want to put in for education stuff that you're doing?
I would just say, in general, the Tuttle Twins, you can find that at TuttleTwins.com. We've got that. This is our 10th book now that we have coming out. So we're going to keep doing probably about 2 a year. And so really, frankly, it's a fantastic supplement for families whose kids are at public school for whatever reason, because these parents are recognizing that the teachers, the curriculum are not going to be given their children exposure to these ideas. And so these books can be a resource for the parents to take that initiative themselves and then have some real conversations with their kids about complex ideas that most adults don't even understand. So I would encourage everybody to check out the Tuttle Twins books and do your part to help the rising generation learn these important topics.
Yep. Perfect. Thanks for your time this morning, Connor, and good luck on the
you.
books.
Thanks.